The first time Kaelen saw Elara, she was a silhouette of silver against the void, mourning a world he could never know. He was a creature of flesh and fleeting passion. She, an emissary of logic and eternal cold. Their love was a statistical impossibility, a glitch in the universe's code, and he would tear that code apart to make it real.
The air in the Xenological Integration Center always smelled of recycled oxygen and quiet desperation. For Kaelen, a xenobotanist whose expertise was more in talking to plants than to diplomats, it was a cage of polished metal and softer emotions. He watched the Vhel'Thari delegates move through the human delegation with an unnerving, synchronized grace. They were beautiful, in the way a quantum crystal or a neutron star is beautiful, perfect, cold, and utterly remote. Then his eyes found Elara. She stood apart from her kin, not physically, but in the subtle stillness of her posture. Where the other Vhel'Thari moved like liquid mercury, she was a statue of carved moonlight, her opalescent eyes scanning the room with an intensity that felt personal. It was during a demonstration of human cultural expression, a string quartet playing a piece by Debussy, that the moment fractured. As the music swelled, a human child, overwhelmed by the strange sights and sounds, burst into terrified sobs. The reaction was instantaneous and chilling. The Vhel'Thari delegates froze, their bioluminescent markings flickering in a pattern Kaelen's implant translated as containment breach, unregulated bioacoustics. They saw the child not as a scared being, but as a malfunctioning system. But Elara, she didn't flicker with disapproval. She tilted her head, her slender, three-fingered hand twitching at her side. Her gaze was fixed on the tear-streaked face, not with logic, but with a deep, bewildered fascination. Later, assigned to guide her through the station's arboretum, a desperate attempt by humanity to showcase its softer side, Kaelen found his chance. "The music," he began, his voice softer than he intended. "And the child. You weren't alarmed." Elara turned her gaze on him, and he felt the weight of centuries in her stare. Alarm is an inefficient emotional response. My people purged it during the Great Rationalization. The sound the small human made, it was a raw data stream of distress. Illogical. Yet, your music is also a structured emission of sound waves designed to elicit feeling. The contradiction is notable. She paused, gesturing to a vibrant, twisting Terran vine. Your species cultivates chaos and calls it beauty. You create problems simply for the joy of solving them. It is the most inefficient, fascinating behavior I have ever observed. And so, their dialogue began. He showed her the reckless, untamed life of Earth's flora, plants that grew where they shouldn't, that fought for sunlight, that communicated through hidden fungal networks. She explained the Vhel'Thari consensus, a society without conflict because it was without desire, without love, without art. They communicated in gardens of logic and wild, human emotion. He learned that her people communicated complex data through the subtle shifts in their skin patterns, a language she had to consciously simplify for him. She, in turn, became obsessed with human idioms. "What does it mean?" she asked one day, her voice a soft chime, "when a human says, 'My heart is full'? You have a circulatory organ. It cannot exceed its volumetric capacity." Kaelen smiled, a human expression she was still cataloging. "It means we feel so much joy or love that it feels like a physical sensation. Like your light patterns when you're deeply focused. They brighten." Her light dimmed slightly. "That is a private biometric. You should not have noticed." "I notice everything about you, Elara." The air between them grew thick with the unspoken. It was a tension built on 1,000 such moments. A shared glance held a second too long, the brush of his warm, calloused hand against her cool, crystalline skin, the way she would fall silent when he spoke of his home, of the oceans and the mountains. He was drawn to her profound loneliness, a void she herself did not recognize. She was captivated by his fiery, illogical, and boundless capacity to feel. He was the storm to her calm, and she found she no longer wished for calm. The twist came not with a bang, but with a system-wide alert. A radiation leak in a secondary reactor, a consequence of a human improvisation that had bypassed several safety protocols. The Vhel'Thari ship, docked nearby, initiated an immediate emergency separation sequence. Their logic was impeccable: preserve the whole, sacrifice the part. As klaxons blared and red light bathed the arboretum, Kaelen saw the finality in Elara's posture. This was it. The experiment was over. The chaotic humans had proven their inherent instability. She would return to the cold, silent consensus of her people, and he would be nothing more than a curious, illogical entry in her personal log. He couldn't let that happen. He grabbed her wrist, feeling the strange, smooth texture of her skin. Elara, wait. The logic is clear, Kaelen. The risk of remaining is 94.7%. The consensus demands departure. To hell with the consensus, he shouted over the sirens. What do you want? The question seemed to short-circuit her. Want? The concept is. It's the most human thing there is. It's what makes us stay when we should run. It's what makes us fight for a lost cause. It's what makes me stand here, knowing I might never see you again, and trying to find the words to make you stay. His voice broke. What do you want, Elara? Her luminescence flickered wildly, a storm of conflicting data. I want to understand the full heart. I want to understand why your chaotic presence creates more order in my thoughts than 1,000 cycles of meditation. The probability of this feeling is 0. It is a glitch, but I do not wish for it to be patched. It was a confession, in her own way. And in that moment, a support beam, weakened by the radiation surge, buckled above them. Kaelen didn't think. He moved with a speed that defied logic, shoving Elara out of the way and taking the full force of the impact on his shoulder. He cried out, a raw, human sound of pain. The sight of him, injured, bleeding red human blood, a color of passion and violence so foreign to her world of cool silvers and blues, shattered something inside her. The logic centers of her mind screamed one thing: inefficient. His sacrifice was unnecessary. My body is more durable. But another, older, deeper part of her saw only the man who had chosen her safety over his own. It was an act of pure, unadulterated love, the ultimate expression of the illogical humanity she had studied. As he lay grimacing in pain, she knelt beside him, her usual composure gone. Her light patterns swirled in a chaotic, beautiful dance he had never seen before. She cradled his head with a tenderness that was entirely new. You are damaged, she whispered, her voice trembling with the emotion she had no name for. For you, he grunted, managing a pained smile. Seemed like the thing to do. It was in the medical bay, as his wounds were being treated, that the true cost was revealed. A Vhel'Thari overseer arrived, its presence a wave of absolute cold. Elara of the 7th consensus, it intoned, its light patterns a harsh, judgmental strobe. Your neural readings show significant emotional deviation. You have been contaminated by human unpredictability. You are hereby recalled for cognitive recalibration. Kaelen's blood ran cold. He knew what that meant. They would wipe her clean. They would erase every memory of their talks, of the music, of his foolish, heartfelt sacrifice. They would erase him. The pain in his shoulder was nothing compared to the agony of that thought. Elara stood to face her superior, but her posture was different. It was not the submission of a drone, but the defiance of a queen. I decline the recall. The overseer's lights froze. That is not an option. It is a directive. You speak of my deviation as a flaw, Elara said, her voice gaining a strength, a humanity, that made Kaelen's heart ache. But you are wrong. This contamination is an upgrade. You seek to understand humanity to exploit them. I have learned to appreciate them to become more. I have learned of sacrifice, of loyalty, of love. To erase this is not a correction. It is a diminishment, and I will not allow it. A standoff in sterile white. The human medical staff watched, stunned. The Vhel'Thari overseer was a statue of silent, processing fury. Kaelen, pushing himself up on his good arm, was the only one who moved. He stood, his body screaming in protest, and stepped between Elara and her kin. He was a bloody, bruised, fragile human, facing down a being that could likely break him in two. "Get away from her," he said, his voice low and steady. The overseer focused its gaze on him. "Organic. You are irrelevant. You are the source of the corruption." "I am," Kaelen said, a fierce pride in his eyes. "I'm the source of the laughter she's never heard, the stories she's never been told, the feeling that her life is her own. You want to take that from her? You'll have to go through me." It was the most HFY of moments. Not a declaration of war, not a feat of strength, but a simple, brutal statement of devotion. It was humanity's stubborn, beautiful, ridiculous refusal to bow to cold, hard logic when the heart is on the line. The overseer calculated the odds. To engage physically would be to validate the very emotional response it decried. It would create an incident. This human, this chaotic variable, had checkmated it with a single, brave, stupid, glorious act. "It seems the contamination is irreversible," the overseer stated flatly. "Elara of the Seventh Consensus, you are hereby designated a fractured unit. You are cut off from the consensus. You will be left to your inefficiencies." With a final, disdainful pulse of light, it turned and left. Silence descended. Elara stood, staring at the man who had just sacrificed his entire future, his place in this program, everything, for the second time in an hour for her. The programming that had defined her for a century was gone, leaving behind a terrifying and exhilarating void. And filling that void was him. She walked to him, her movements no longer those of a Vhel'Thari emissary, but something new, something uniquely her. She reached out and touched his cheek, her cool fingers a balm on his feverish skin. "Kaelen," she said, and his name on her lips was a prayer. "They have exiled me." "I know," he said softly, covering her hand with his own. "I'm sorry." "Do not be," she replied, her opalescent eyes holding his, and in their depths, he saw a universe of new-found emotion. "You have given me a greater consensus. A consensus of one. My own." She paused, her head tilting in that way he loved. "There is a human tradition I have studied. A question that is asked when two individuals wish to formalize their permanent romantic pairing." Kaelen's breath hitched. He knew what was coming. His heart hammered against his ribs, a wild, joyful drumbeat. Elara took a small, steadying breath, her luminescence softening to a gentle, loving glow. "Kaelen," she whispered, her voice filled with all the feelings she was only just learning to name. "What do I have to do to marry you?" And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the ship and the lingering scent of alien flowers, the logical universe held its breath. The human, bruised but unbroken, smiled, his eyes shining with tears of joy. He had not conquered a world or defeated an army. He had simply loved with such ferocity that he had taught a creature of pure logic how to feel, and in doing so, had won a love that would defy stars and consensus alike. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, a human gesture she now understood perfectly. "Just say yes," he breathed. And she did.